Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 108. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, and be sure to check us out at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com. I have two guests for this episode, guitarist Nick Miller and drummer Tommy Van Arsdale. They're members of the Chicago hard rock act Dust Biters. Dust Biters released their debut album, Guilt, in August of 2022 independently. They re-released their single, Progeny, complete with a new video on YouTube. So to tell you more about it, here's Nick Miller and Tommy Van Arsdale of Dust Biters. If I knew absolutely nothing about Dust Biters, how would you describe the band's music to me?
My favorite answer to that is we're the music that's played on the county fair ride that you have to be a certain height to ride, and the guy is not paying attention when he's buckling you in.
Fair enough. Tom, do you have another take on that?
Yeah, we're a 1977 Pontiac Firebird in a bag of mushrooms.
Well, I see what I'm getting here.
No, I mean, like the real, I mean, like we say that we're post-hardcore just because it tends to be a bit of a catch-all, because it is really kind of hard to drill down on a genre for us. We can, in one song we can go from like a technical, like, thrashy kind of riff straight into like punk. I mean, and then on our album it goes from like some really like hard rock, like driven riffs, all the way to like some, really emo, sad sounding like piano and stringed songs that we wrote in the studio that's like at the very end. So post-hardcore tends to just encompass like everything that we're doing, without, I don't want to say like, oh, we're a punk band, because then you're not going to get what you're expecting with that. But we do have punk elements, and we have a lot of songs that have punk riffs in them. But same thing with like metal. I'm not going to tell you that we're, like this crazy technical, super hard, super fast metal band, but when we have a lot of those kind of riffs. But we tend to like really kind of go wherever we want with a song. Whatever feels kind of natural to us is what we do.
And how did you guys all get together to form this band?
So me and the singer Nick had been in bands when we were like in our early 20s back in Michigan, because he grew up in the small town right next to my small town. So we had like similar friends that ran in the same friend circles, and he was a bass player in a cool hardcore band. And my band would play with his band, and then eventually we started to play in a band together. Our lives kind of went different pathways. He moved to Chicago to pursue hair. I moved to Pittsburgh to pursue like piercing. And eventually I opened up, I co-founded a coffee shop with a friend of mine, and I kind of like pursued having like a music venue, and being in a band was something that I still wanted to do, but when you're trying to get something off the ground, you tend to never have any time to do it. So I just had like a room full of music gear while I was living there. And eventually, like I stayed in contact with Nick because we've always been really close, and we've always been very, very good friends. And he told me that he was getting ready to have his third child and getting ready to open up his first barbershop. And, like having just opened up a business, I kind of had an idea of how chaotic and crazy and stressful and just every hard thing that comes up when trying to do that, and especially having your third child. It was one of those things where I was kind of homesick. Chicago's closer to my hometown. I fell in love with Chicago years in advance, so like I was trying to move to Chicago anyways. I was kind of over being a business owner, so I basically sold off all my ownership, packed everything up, and moved to Chicago. And then right before COVID hit, we were out for my birthday, just kind of like talking shit. And, I just was like, dude, it'd be really cool if you picked up guitar. Maybe if all we did was like, just write some riffs together, it'd be fun. Like, I just miss playing music. And, he had been in a kind of a dark place with his drinking. And so when he decided to quit drinking, he put all of his efforts into playing music again. And so we started writing, and we wrote everything like sitting on my couch, and then COVID hit, so everything shut down. So all we had time to do was kind of like hang out and play music. And then that turned into Unholy Gospel and Creature Man, which when I would go into work and I would see Tommy, we would sit and talk music and talk out bands, and like, you know, we would both basically like throw out really obscure bands at each other, and we both be like, yeah, I love this album, and like things like that. And it's like, okay, cool, we're friends because clearly we love the same music. And he told me about all the bands that he's ever been in and how he was a drummer and a guitar player and a singer and all these different things. And I, you know, I didn't really know how passionate he was about playing drums. I just knew that he could play drums. So I asked him if he would sit in on a session, because in Chicago, luckily enough, we have places where you can rent out rehearsal spaces that come fully furnished with all the gear you could want, minus guitars and bass. So they had drum sets, they had half stacks and PA systems and all that stuff. So we rented out a space for 2 hours and had him kind of session with us. And our personalities kind of all gelled really well. We got along really well. He was putting beats to our songs like immediately. He was making suggestions and, you know, helping the songs kind of come together a little bit easier. And after we kind of heard how that was kind of working, and that the songs actually had some substance to them and they were fun to play, you know, it was kind of like, hey, do you want to do it again? And then it was like, maybe we should find a space of our own, since I have an apartment filled with a bunch of band gear that I traveled to Chicago with, and I really want to get it out of my apartment. And so like we rented a space and just started writing. And eventually like Brian joined the band, and he was a guitar player. He started out as an apprentice for our singer Nick at his barbershop. And also similar situation, they talked music, discovered that they have a lot of the same interests. He said, I'll learn the guitar part, or I'll learn the bass parts if you want to teach them to me. Showed up, we all got along. Now we're all like super great friends, and that's the story of how Dust Spider started writing.
Tom, is there anything you want to add to the story?
No, Nick nailed it. I think he's absolutely right. It all started with our mutual love for music and just discussing bands, albums that inspired us throughout our life, and quickly, as he said, just becoming friends opened up that space for us to work together really well creatively in a collaborative environment. The Venn diagrams of all of our influences definitely converge in very specific parts. So we all have mutual love for certain bands like Against Me, Glassjaw, you know, At the Drive-In, etc. But we all kind of have our own, you know, very particular genres and bands that mean something to us. So I love the fact that when we get together, we can nerd out about certain things that really made impacts on us, but we always have something new to bring to the table as well. So I enjoy that.
You guys released your debut album in August of 2022 called Guilt. You've recently released a music video for Progeny, which is a re-release of sorts. If you want to talk a little bit about the song itself.
Yeah, Progeny was the last song that we wrote for the album Guilt, and it happened to be the lead single from the record as well. It's a song that we really love playing live. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of energy in it. Kinsley's lyrics talk about sort of many of the encompassing themes on the album, like shame, kind of regret, guilt, forgiveness. It really has to do with his kids and kind of the story of how his children have helped him to overcome some of the struggles that he's had in his life, and to kind of value being there for them and helping them to be raised well and have a good life and understand people make mistakes and can be forgiven. So it's sort of a love letter to them. And a lot of the themes on that song, as I said, permeate throughout the entire album. The music video, when we were talking about wanting to release one, it made a lot of sense to do it for that song. There's a lot of imagery in what he's talking about. So when we were discussing the loose concept of it, we thought taking it into this sort of cult leader direction, where the cult leader has become totally disengaged from his harem of women that absolutely worship him, and he's just bored and sort of over it, but also unable to get past being selfish and narcissistic, was sort of the weird and tangential imagery that we wanted to bring in to the lyrics. So the music video, again, you know, thanks in large part to our director, Matt Cooley, that sort of loose concept we were able to flesh out. And I think it turned out really well. I think it's hopefully people can see sort of the transition between like the daytime and the nighttime, and sort of the daytime like cult ritual versus the nighttime poisoning. but yeah, I think it came together really well. We're very proud of how the music video turned out.
You have anything to add to that, Nick?
No, I mean, he kind of got into all of it. The one thing that I will say that's kind of like an interesting trivia fact is that the main chorus riff of Progeny is actually a chorus riff that we wrote for Creature Man when we first started the band, that just did not fit into the song, and we just kind of kept it in our back pockets. And, fast forward 6, 7 songs later, and we're working on Progeny, and we're like, I think that maybe we can get that chorus riff in there. So it's really interesting. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of musicians and stuff like that, but songs and how parts come together and how certain things kind of gel. It's interesting to me that it's one of the first riffs that we ever wrote wound up being in one of the last songs that we wrote for the record.
You have other singles out to promote the album. You have the song Lushed Up, if you want to talk a little bit about that song.
Sure. That's a song that our singer invented a word for. So as much, maybe I'm wrong, but all the research that I looked up, I don't think that there's a past tense version of lush. But I do kind of like it because it works really well for the song and for the attitude and the emotion that he's trying to convey. But it's very much, it's a song of him talking about his experience and his behavior when he likes to drink. And it's kind of it's almost like a very bittersweet drinking party anthem, it's something to enjoy and have fun. And when we perform it live, it's one of the songs that like a lot of the audience really gets into, and they love to chant with us. And people are cheersing and holding their beers up and enjoying. But when you dig into those lyrics, they're very sad, and there's a lot of self-loathing there. And it's also one of my favorite songs to just play live. There's a ton of shredding and like fun things to do on guitar in that song. And there's a lot of parts for audience participation, like chanting and things like that. So it's a song I'm always looking forward to in the set for me.
And you just made up a word there too. You said cheersing. So you guys are rubbing off on each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a Midwest, like Michigan thing. We just come up with shit.
Tom, do you want to talk about the other single you have out, Dear Evil?
Yeah, Dear Evil's great. So, Dear Evil is another one of those songs where we all sort of just put in our own particular influences on that song. It reminds me a lot. There's some parts in there that remind me a lot of like Thin Lizzy and whatnot. The end of that song is one of my favorites to play live. But I think in general, each of these singles definitely say something about the album in general. And I think the fact that we picked all 4 of these to promote the album, they each kind of give a little different perspective of where we're going musically and lyrically. I don't know, Nick, if you want to add anything to that.
The singles, we picked the singles out specifically to show, well, one, I think that they're the most like fun songs. I think that like they have the catchiest parts on them. So, they're the things that I think will resonate with the listener and will stay in their heads. But also I think that they do a really good job of doing a representation of what our music sounds like in general. So you pick any of those 4 singles and you're going to have a good idea of what the rest of the record's going to sound like, except for the very, very last track, Goddamn Guilt, is definitely a far departure from the rest of the album. But any of those 4 tracks, and you can definitely get a good assumption of what you're going to hear when you listen to the rest of Guilt.
I see and hear a lot of, I don't want to call it influence, but a lot of references to religious things such as, Unholy Gospel and Pray for Me and Goddamn Guilt and things like that. Is that intentional or just the way that it happened to be?
So I think that it's kind of 50-50. I think that it was intentional because a lot of those lyrics kind of came from a place of things that our singer Nick was dealing with at the time. He has a lot of issues with trying to figure out how to introduce religion to his children. And it's, I don't want to go too much into like his personal relationship with his ex and things like that, but it's, I can only put myself in his shoes and speculate, but I would obviously want to give my children awareness and understanding of religion, but I think that I would have a really hard time telling them that it's something that they needed to participate in. You know, and I think that like he kind of has the same thing, but also while trying to respect the parenting style of his ex, you know, has a very, you know, like rough wall that he's kind of battling in that scenario. And then both me and him kind of grew up dealing with small town mentality, which, you know, like religion has a big influence on hatred and bigotry, especially towards, you know, like when it comes to like homophobia and racism and, you know, like all of those things that tend to, you know, make it very hard for people to be accepting towards other people's lifestyles. And, you know, if you look at me, I'm covered in tattoos and piercings and stretch lobes, and this has been who I am since I was 16 years old. So growing up in a small town, I dealt with a lot of, like weird looks and people talking, and my parents dealt with a lot of hearing it from other people's parents and stuff. And I think a lot of that came from religious influence. So, Nick dealt with a lot of that stuff too when he was growing up, and we watch our hometowns do these crazy things that where like you're embarrassed when you see people hang certain banners that are like homophobic or racist, and you're just like, that's happening in our downtown, like, really. And so I think that there's a point of contention for both me and Nick towards that kind of stuff. So it's fun for us to pick on religion, and it's fun to highlight things that are obviously like really kind of gross in the organizations and stuff like that. And it's almost low-hanging fruit. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like too easy to kind of like pick on religion a little bit. But it's also I think it's important to have some points of frustration and anger in this kind of music. Like, you want to have something to allow people to rally with you, behind you, and to get on board with. And I think that in 2023, there's a lot of people that are frustrated with where religion is and how involved it is in politics in our lives and stuff like that. And in the negative sense, we've lost a lot of the positive sense. But yeah, that's like, and then again, like, I can really only kind of regurgitate and speculate some of the things that I've heard Nick talk about when it comes to his perspective on that kind of stuff. But like, that's one of the reasons why I think that we have some of those themes in the songs. And as we move into this newer music, I'm seeing it less and less in Nick's lyrics, because I feel like maybe he said what he's wanted to say about it. But you never know. Like, some crazy controversial story might come up, and you might hear about it from us again.
You guys brought in producer ALEX LACKNER from LAZARUS A.D., recorded at Accelerated Sound. What did he bring to the table for the band?
Alex was great to work with. He was, he's a very great musician in his own right. So having someone in the studio that was working with us hand in glove on making the sounds that we heard in our heads translate onto the record, and he was the perfect person for us. He understood us as people, he understood us as musicians and as a group. And so working with him was an absolute pleasure. I mean, we would be in a room, as bands do, to record an album for hours, and he just was calm, cool, and collected, and very calculated, had ideas himself that he brought to the table. So he really was not just an engineer, but a producer, and helped us to kind of work past some things that we needed help with, and bring, again, to light some of the life that we knew that we wanted to translate, but didn't know necessarily how to get it out into the recordings. So it was a great time working with him. Specifically, as Nick was mentioning, the last song in the album, Goddamn Guilt, that whole song was an absolute process to put together, and having him in the engineering seat as a musician with active listening was critical to, I think, the success of that song on the album. And it, despite the fact that it doesn't sound like any other song on the album, it is one of my favorites, and people love when we play it live, even though it doesn't sound anything like how it sounds recorded on the album. So he was an absolute delight.
I don't have like a ton of experience being in the studio in a professional sense. Like, usually most of the recordings I've been a part of have been basement recordings or demos or things like that. But the handful of experiences that I have working with somebody in a professional sense, you either have a engineer or producer that can be a little he can ride you a little too hard, expecting you to nail parts in one, and like in a full take and things like that, where Alex was, very, very encouraging and very, very supportive through the whole recording process, where, like even if we nailed a take, like just absolutely nailed it, he'd be like, like, I really like what you did right there. Like everything came through really well. It's good that we have one in the can, but like, let's try and see if we can get it to feel a little bit more natural, or like, let's see if we can get another really good take just so that way I have it. And he would just sit there and kind of support you through the process and making sure that, you never felt bad about because I constantly felt like I'm sorry if I'm like wasting the day. And he was just like, any time that we're spending recording is not wasted, like, don't worry. He's like, we're here to capture the band and make sure everything sounds great. He's like, and I'm not leaving the room until we do that. So you kind of felt like you were on a team, like you were both trying to accomplish the same goal. And it did not feel like, like I was the musician for hire working with an engineer trying to like just get something out of me. It felt like, and I think that was one of the reasons why we really wanted to work with him, is because he had the same perspective and energy towards just wanting to make sure that the band is captured correctly, because it is a very unique sound and it's very weird, and we play with very aggressive tones, and so there's a lot of challenging mixes for him, for sure. So I'm really glad that he spent the time that he did on making sure that we got everything captured correctly. Otherwise, I think that record could have came out very very messy and hard to understand, and it would not have translated the same.
Part of the album release back in August, a couple of local businesses supported the band. You guys had your own burger at Kuma's Corner, and you had your own beer at Metal Monkey Brewing. How did those deals come together? I assume you guys have some ties to these businesses.
We do, yes. So I'll touch on the Kuma's one real fast. Just to be fully transparent, I do communications and marketing for Kuma's Corner. Tommy, he is the general manager for our West Loop location. Now, that being said, we did not actually solicit the company to do the burger. Obviously, we had talked like, oh man, it'd be really cool to do a Dust Spider burger. But we absolutely were aware of our status as a band. Like we're new. We had a lot of dues to pay and things to accomplish and to get our name out there. But our coworkers are extremely supportive. You go into our West Loop location, and on any day given of the week, there's somebody working front of house or back of house, probably wearing a Dust Spider shirt. Like our coworkers and our friends are really, really great, and they're super supportive. And the director of operations actually came to us and asked us if we wanted to do the burger. So for people that are probably making the assumption that, of course, we got a burger at Kuma's Corner because we work there. While that did help, it definitely opened the door. It was brought to us and suggested and offered to us, not the other way around. But yeah, and then the brewery was a place that we had worked with like loosely. So I was aware of them because they book metal shows and they work with a lot of metal bands. So I was aware of them, and we had done a collaboration with another band, and they had done a beer for them. And through that, we wound up talking to them about booking their venue. And while we played, the day that we were out there playing the venue, we kind of like brought it up loosely, like, oh, we'd love to do a beer sometime. Maybe we can talk about doing it when, we're releasing the record. And they were very receptive and really nice about it. And again, like they're very, very like supportive of the metal scene and metal bands in general. And they love to work with bands. They saw it as like a really cool opportunity to, again, support another cool band in the area. Fast forward a couple months, and we started talking out some ideas. They really loved the concept and the idea. The other thing that we did was, we used the actual physical release of the cans as a way to sell our record. So when you bought the can, like a 4-pack, it came with a digital copy of the record, and that was a lot of fun to do. So yeah, I mean, like all of that kind of worked out, and then we just timed it really, really well. So it was like the album would drop, the burger would come out, the beer would be in the stores. So if you walked into a Kuma's, you could actually have like a Dust Spiders beer with your Dust Spiders burger. And so it's just very kind of cool to have all that synchronicity and have everything kind of working together.
It's certainly a different kind of beer. A sour goes with habanero and pineapple. I would say it's about as diverse as your music.
And you know what? It's delicious. It's one of my favorite beers I've ever had. I loved it. And I think it was 4.5% alcohol. So it's one of those things that you could like sit out on the patio and like drink all day and not, be blackout hammered by the end of the day.
Do you guys just play locally in the Chicago area, or do you have plans and aspirations to go national?
We were lucky enough to do a small tour in support of the release of Guilt. So that took us to Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and we had an absolute blast. I mean, like I said at the top of the interview, just hanging out with these guys is the most fun. I mean, we're all great friends, and our sense of humor, we could go on the road forever and keep ourselves entertained, and then, oh, actually we have to play a show tonight. It's just a bonus as we get to go on stage and do what we love to do the most. So we'd absolutely love to tour. Again, spring, summer, fall's coming up. So looking at some opportunities there. But yeah, absolutely. Being on the road, exploring different cities, making new fans, making new friends in different bands that we share the bills with, getting to explore different venues is an absolute joy. It's something that we all love to do. So yeah, definitely look out on our website and social media for upcoming tour dates outside of Illinois.
Are either of you in any other bands, or is Dust Biters it? There seems to be a lot of people that have their hands in different kinds of music and bands just to kind of stay busy.
I don't think I'd have the time. I'm so busy as it is. I mean, being in a band and being a musician is my favorite thing to do in the entire world. And it's very difficult to find the time to do it as often as we need to. I mean, I wish that we could rehearse 2 to 3 times a week, but the most that we can do is, once a week. And then occasionally we can squeeze in like a second rehearsal for preparing for a performance. But, it's not like back in the day when I was in my teens and in 20s, I could blow off work and, like just go and crash on my buddy's couch and we could rehearse that all day, every day, drinking beer and, and like not caring about responsibilities and stuff. But, I have a very demanding job and a lot of people relying on me to make money. So I have to make sure that I'm giving my job my 100%. And then my band is 99.9% behind that and doesn't leave a lot of room for any other bands.
That being said, though, I think in our downtime, if we have downtime, we just practice music. So it's still enjoyable. It's still a hobby, a passion, in addition to the band. There's a lot of business elements to the band that are stressful. Most of it is not playing music. Most of it is social media and doing interviews and whatnot. But for us, playing music, writing music, spending time together is the joy. So if we could do it more, we would.
Who came up with the name Dust Biters? What inspired it?
So I came up with it a long time ago. It's been a band name that's been in my back pocket for a while. I kept it to myself. I have a bad habit of coming up with ideas and then sharing them with people. So this was one that I was just like, if I get it out there, somebody's going to start a band or something with it. That night that we were out for my birthday and I was kind of trying to talk Nick into playing music with me again. I told him I already had a band name and I pitched it to him and he loved it. It was inspired by a Queen song, another one bites the dust. And I just was really kind of obsessed with, like who are those people? Who are the people that bit the dust? Like another one bites the dust. It's like, okay, well, who are these perpetual losers? Like that fail at every attempt to try to, win. Like who are the like those super tough badasses that in the Roadhouse movie that show up to, have fun and drink and then they get their ass beat. Like it's like I don't know. I love that concept and it was just something that always kind of stuck in my head. And I pitched the idea to Nick and he loved it as well. And I think that everybody else in the band was just like, it's hard enough to come up with a good band name, let alone something that has a good concept that people can relate to and understand where the meaning came from. So I think that it was just kind of like, rather than going to a whiteboard and listing out a bunch of different band names and trying things out, I think it was like, it's good enough. Let's go with that and see how people go with it. And we've gotten a lot of good compliments and people tend to really like the band name. So sticking with it.
You hinted at it earlier. Are you guys working on new music for the next album?
Yes. So we've got 4 songs right now that we are working to demo. One of them we've actually had the opportunity to play out live. We played a show at Beat Kitchen for Forever Death Fest a couple weeks ago, and then the following night up in Grand Rapids at Pyramid Scheme, and we debuted one of those new songs, Bittersweet, and it was an absolute blast. Got some good reception from that. So that, in addition to 3 others, we're really excited about these songs. They are so much fun to play. We said to ourselves, let's write simple music, straightforward rock and roll music. We have done the antithesis of that. We have gone bonkers, which is totally fine. It's a blast. So these 4 songs we're looking forward to hopefully demoing and maybe shopping around and seeing anyone wants to help us, go to the studio and actually lay these down in a professional setting. But that's what's up next, whether that be an EP with these 4 songs or, a series of singles. Our goal is to get these down and to keep working on new material.
We also have developed our next music video concept. So now it's just going to be finding the time to film it and getting all the right people on board. But we have some really cool people attached to the idea right now. So, hopefully we'll have a new music video out, come like summer, fall this year too as well.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you, Nick and Tom. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Your current album is Guilt. It's out now, streaming, and people can get it physical, I assume, as well. And I learned a lot about Dust Biters today, and I hope that the listeners did too.
All our physical music is available on dustbitersband.com. We have a store on there. We have a 7-inch that have the 4 singles on it. We have cassette tapes that are in red and black for collectors. Obviously, we have CDs. Everything's available on Bandcamp, Spotify, all of like the major platforms. Dust Biters Official for our Instagram. I mean, like, obviously, we want people to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we're active on both of those, but we're mostly active on our Instagram. So find us there, and you'll have all the up-to-date info for all of that stuff. We should be releasing. So Progeny, we actually like seeked out an artist to do new artwork just for that single. So we should be releasing some cool merch around that stuff here soon, and slowly putting that together. So we'll have like a drop for that soon. So if anybody watches that and you're not following us, go follow us on Instagram, because we're going to be releasing all that artwork as merch and stuff soon.
All right, guys. Once again, thanks again. Best of luck with everything, and hopefully I'll see you make your way to the East Coast one day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'd love that. Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank Nick Miller and Tommy Van Arsdale of Dust Biters for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out their latest album, Guilt, out now. Head over to your favorite music streaming app. Take a listen to the new album. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy. Support the artist. For all things Dust Biters, head to their official website, dustbitersband.com. I also want to thank Barbara Papa George of Pavement Entertainment for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.